Hello, and welcome to Vim for Rails Developers. My name is Ben Orenstein, and in this screencast, I'm going to be showing you the best tricks and techniques I have picked up for writing Rails code in Vim. I'm going to start off focusing on some fundamentals and then move into some more specific topics. I'm excited to get started. Let's go! Okay, so the very first thing that I want to talk about is typing speed. To me, this is the most fundamental of fundamentals. And the reason is, the faster you can type, the faster your brain can look ahead at the code that's coming up. So if you type slowly, it doesn't just mean that you produce code more slowly, but that you're forcing your brain to slow down as well. So if you take two programmers that are both equally intelligent and both equally skilled with Vim, but have different typing speeds, the faster typist is going to write code more quickly. Now, it's hard to improve how good a programmer you are, and the rest of the screencast will improve how good you are with Vim, so I think you should spend some time on the third part and learn to type quickly. So what is quickly? I think a reasonable goal for just about anybody is 80 words per minute. For me, that's right around the point where your fingers are working about as fast as your brain, and your brain does not have to slow down for your fingers to catch up. So this is a really attainable goal. You can probably get this if you practice a little bit each day in under 2 months. So once your typing speed is up to snuff, I think the next most important fundamental is to be familiar with the most important and most widely used Vim commands. Now, Vim is designed really well, and because of that, the tasks that you need to do most frequently are bound to only single keystrokes. So a corollary of that is, if you look down at your keyboard and you don't know what all the single letter keys do, lowercase and uppercase, there's a chance that you're missing some important functionality, and you're probably taking the long way around for a number of tasks that have a much more efficient alternative. So the best way of remedying this, I found, is at a site called vimu.com. They have put together a graphical cheat sheet. This breaks down by key what every key on the keyboard does in Vim. It's color-coded. It's well put together. It's very understandable once you realize what the color coding means. And I highly recommend this for filling in the gaps. If you don't know what capital L does, if you don't know what capital H does, these are great, useful things. Grab this cheat sheet, print it out, and work through it. And I think you're going to add some really useful stuff to your arsenal. Now, if you're a Dvorak user like I am, there's a link on that page for a Dvorak version as well. So I just mentioned Dvorak. If you're not familiar with it, it's a keyboard layout that's designed to make typing more efficient by keeping you on the home row as much as possible. So to accomplish this, they put all the most commonly used letters and vowels all in the home row. Now, Dvorak comes up a lot when people are learning to type more quickly. I learned Dvorak years ago because I didn't touch type QWERTY, and I figured if I were going to learn a layout, it might as well be one that was more efficient. However, if you're in the same boat and you are where I was and you don't touch type at all, I actually would not recommend learning Dvorak. So it's not about the layout, which I actually do like a lot. It's about the portability hit. Now, I don't mind having a huge vimrc file because I can copy that to every machine I use. It's not a big deal. But typing with a different layout requires changes at the operating system level. So because of this, it's a pain for me to use other people's machines, and it's an even bigger pain for them to use mine. Now, this can be a drag, especially when pair programming. I usually come down on the efficiency is more important than portability side of things, but this is an exception to that. If you don't touch type, learn to touch type QWERTY. One caveat to that, though, if you suffer from any sort of RSI, like carpal tunnel, or your fingers get really tired at the end of the day, Dvorak actually is really great at helping with that. Your fingers definitely do travel less. So if that's an issue for you, do consider learning the layout. Next, I'm going to cover what I consider to be the most important Vim plugin for Rails developers, which is Rails.Vim by Tim Pope. Tim Pope has written a ton of different Vim plugins. Rails.Vim is definitely his magnum opus. If you are writing Rails code using Vim and you are not using this, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. It will save you a ton of time in typing. I can't recommend it enough. So I'm going to show you the functionality of this plugin that I use most frequently. Now, as you might imagine, you can learn all of this from the documentation for Rails.vim, which you can get by typing :help Rails once you've installed the plugin. But if you're the kind of person that learns better by having someone show you something as opposed to digging through documentation, this should be helpful for you. Once you've installed Rails.vim, you'll find that all of the commands are namespaced under a capital R. So to access any of the Rails.vim commands, you'll type : a capital R, and then the command name, many of which take arguments. So the first I want to show you is rfind. So the application I'm in right now is an events registration application. So if I wanted to open up the event model, I would type rfind event. Just hitting enter on that, Rails.vim knows to take me to the event model. Not only that, but event will now tab complete to various useful things. Having typed event, if I tab through, I can get to the event test, to the events view directory, to the events controller, the controller test, and even the events helper. So Rails.vim has modified Vim itself to tell it how to tab complete these file names to jump to the things that you are most likely to access. So even though I have an events controller, if I type rfind event, Rails.vim figures that the most common thing that I'm going to want is the event model and jumps me there first. The next command I'm going to show you is actually an exception to the rule that every Rails.vim feature begins with a capital R. This one is just accessed by typing gf, which is mnemonic for go to file. Now Vim has this behavior already. If you type gf on any file name, Vim will take you to that file. However, when you're using Rails.vim, that behavior is modified slightly. Rails.vim is context aware within a Rails application and allows you to type gf on a number of identifiers and will take you to the file where those identifiers are specified. This is a lot easier to understand with a couple examples. Here, my cursor is on the word participants. This event has many participants. Typing gf while my cursor is here will jump me to the participant model. gf also understands controller names. Here, my cursor is on welcome for the welcome controller here in my routes. Doing a gf will take me to the welcome controller. gf also understands partials. Here I'm in a helper, and my cursor is on the name of a partial in a render partial call. gf will take me to the membership shared search partial. One last really cool example of gf. Here I am in a partial, and my cursor is on a named route, which is defined in my routes.rb file. Here, gf still understands what's going on. If I gf on the named route path, it will take me to that exact action in my controller. And the cool thing is, behind the scenes, Rails.vim is actually running Ruby, loading up my routes.rb, and looking at my named routes to figure out where this action is. So I'm sure you're getting the idea by now. gf is a great way to move between files in Rails applications. If there's an identifier, chances are gf knows how to go to the file that makes the most sense. However, a lot of the times we're going to want to jump between related files in Rails applications. I'm going to show you how to do that efficiently next. So here's how to jump between related files within your Rails application. So a model and its unit test are definitely related. The unit tests are going to be testing code that's in your model. So from a model file, if we wanted to go to a unit test, I'll use the capital R unit test command. Right now I'm in the event model, and typing this command takes me to the event test, unit test. So let's go back to the model. Now suppose I want to go over to the controller. As you might guess, capital R controller takes me from the event model to the event controller. Now, once I'm here, let's say I wanted to go deal with this controller's tests. Our functional tests will take me to those. So a lot of the time, when I'm using these R commands to jump to related files, I will want to split the window in various ways so that I can see not only the code that I'm switching to, but the code from which I'm switching. So for example, when I'm working on a model and using TDD, for example, I'll often want to have the model and the unit tests side by side in a vertical split. So here I am in an event model. I want to open the unit tests, but I still want to be able to see the model code. So I'm going to type capital R, capital V for vertical, and then U tab to get unit test to come up. Once I hit enter, you can see that the screen splits down the middle and I have a vertical split. My tests are on the left, my model is on the right. I can also split vertically. If I type RS for simply a split unit test, I'll get a vertical split. Tests on the top, code on the bottom. Finally, it's also possible to switch to code in a new tab. From this model, if I wanted to view the unit tests in an additional tab, our capital T unit test would do that for me. You see I now have a new tab with my test code in it. My event is still open here over on the previous tab. I find I don't use this one that much because generally I'm splitting because I want to see everything at once, but maybe this will be useful for you. This next command I find myself using all the time. The way I typically work is to have a file of tests open and then the code under test open as well. I'll make changes to the code and to the tests themselves and frequently rerun the test to make sure everything is still passing. Now, if you want to run a file of tests, you can switch to a different screen session or have a different terminal window open, but this adds a little bit of time every time. It kind of breaks you out of the zone a little bit because you have to leave the editor, and it's not great. Fortunately, Rails.Vim has a way of taking care of this. The command is capital R rake. If you type this and then hit enter, Rails.Vim will make an external call to rake and run just this file of tests for you. The results are outputted directly in the editor in the quick fix window, and you can see if there are errors or if everything passed. This is really excellent. This saves me a few seconds every time I do this, which is hundreds of times a day. It keeps you in the editor. Really terrific. I love this command. The great thing about this rake command is that it is context sensitive and is aware of a bunch of different kinds of files. You can run capital R rake in unit tests, functional tests, and integration tests, and it will run that file. But you can also run it in rspec specs and cucumber features. In each case, it will do the right thing and run the tests for you. Another handy command to know is the rgenerate command. Rather than switching to the command line and using script generate, rgenerate allows you to do these things right from inside of Vim. If I wanted to generate a migration, I could type rgenerate migration and then add foo to bar. When we run this, it will generate that migration and then also take me to the newly created file. So that just about wraps up all the commands from Rails.Vim that I find myself using most frequently. There's still a bunch more there though. It's a really big plugin. I strongly encourage you to spend some time reading through the documentation. It's well written, it's very clear. And you'll pick up some stuff that you won't use quite as often, but might save you a few seconds or a few minutes here and there. It's worth your time. The next plugin I want to talk about is called SnipMate. SnipMate is TextMate style snippets for Vim. These things will of course be very familiar to someone that's coming over from TextMate. For people that aren't initiated, a snippet is a short text fragment you type that will then get expanded out into a larger group of code. SnipMate includes a lot of snippets for a variety of different languages, Rails included. What you'll do is you'll type a few letters of a method name or a class structure, and SnipMate will complete it for you. Here's a few examples. Here I have a file called foo. I want to add a method definition in here, and SnipMate lets me do this very quickly. I start a new line and type def. Now I hit tab. SnipMate recognizes that I've started defining a method definition and highlights the method name for me. I'll call this Baz, and now when I hit tab again, my cursor will be dropped down and indented. Notice that the end has been put on there for me as well. I've only saved a few keystrokes here, but there's tons of these expansions. Now I'm inside the method definition. Let's say I wanted to run a select on a collection. I type SEL and then tab again. Here, SnipMate expands that out into a select with the block parameter already highlighted for me. I change the block parameter and hit tab again, and I moved past that pipe into the body of the block. I really like this because I find it kind of a pain to type those curly braces and those pipes and the element name. It's really nice to be able to just skip over those and land right where you want to start typing code. Now SnipMate comes with a lot of different snippets. Rather than walking you through all of them, I'm going to show you where you can find them so you can read through the file. Here I'm in my .vim/snippets directory. The file we want is called ruby.snippets. You'll notice that it ships with support for a number of other languages. You'll want to check those out too if you use them all the time. Here in the Ruby.snippets, we see the format for a snippet. It begins with the word snippet, followed by the characters that trigger it. So here, if I typed def and then tab, it would be expanded into this snippet below. This snippet looks like def, which is just text, and then this, which is a special form, the $sign followed by curly braces. Now, one means it's the first place that the cursor will jump to, and here it has a default of a method name. So when I type def tab, it will expand to this. This will just say method name, but it will be totally highlighted. Once I change it and hit tab again, the cursor will jump to this point here. Now this looks like it's indented too far. It's not really. This is actually just one tab. This file is formatted with tabs at a number of spaces that make it look off, but it's correct when it expands in a Ruby file. Once you've familiarized yourself with the snippets that come bundled with SnipMate, you're probably going to want to add some of your own. Let's do that now. Let's say that I'm frequently leaving comments in source files while doing a code review, and I want every code review comment to be tagged with my name. I'm going to write a snippet that makes it easier to do this. I'll have this snippet fire on rev as a target. When I type rev and then tab, it'll expand into the text below. Now I want my name to be in here, so I'm going to add one of those special forms that we talked about before with the $curly brace. I want my cursor to go here first, so I'll give it a 1. I'll call this commenter name. That will be highlighted in the text so people will know what's supposed to go there. Then a colon, and then I want to jump past that and start entering my comment. I'll put that second special form here with a number 2 in it so that it'll jump there after I've filled in commenter name. I'm going to save this and now we'll see how it works. Note that you're going to have to exit Vim and come back in because SnipMate rereads this file when Vim starts. So now I want to test out that snippet that we wrote. So I went looking at some old code I'd written and trying to find something that was worthy of a comment, which took about 5 seconds, and found this lovely method right here. So let's try it out. I type in rev and hit tab, and you'll see that SnipMate has expanded that into the text that we entered. Commenter name is highlighted. I'll type in my name, and then when I hit tab again, I'm brought over to that second anchor. Now I can enter my comment, and we're done. Now I want to tell you about a really useful tool that has greatly improved my ability to bounce around a Rails project and also has indirectly helped me understand how Rails itself works. The tool is called exuberant CTags. So CTags is a tool that generates an index file. You run it on a bunch of source files and it generates this index which tells you where methods and variables and classes are defined. Vim knows how to use this index file to jump right to definitions, and it makes you really efficient at finding out, hey, where is this method defined? You may have CTags installed on your system already. Type which CTags and see if it comes back. If you don't get any results, then go to ctags.sourceforge.net and install it from there. Once you have CTags installed, you'll want to run a command that looks pretty close to the following. I'm running CTags in the root of my project. I'm giving it capital R to tell it to recurse, and then having it exclude the git and log directories, finally passing in a star to tell it to index everything. CTags will recurse down through my project and index the place where all my classes, methods, and variables are initially defined. Once I do run this CTags command, the output by default is a file called tags. I leave this tags right in the root of my Rails project, and I always add it to my .gitignore file, so it's not picked up by my version control. The final setup step is to tell Vim where to look for the tags file. This line right here tells Vim that my tags file is going to be in the current directory and is called tags. You can get a lot fancier with this and tell Vim a variety of directories to look at in specific order. If you want to do this, check out help tags. Okay, now that we've got CTags all set up, and we've generated the tags file for this project, we can do some really cool stuff. Here's a quick example. On this line right here, I'm making a call to a toCSV method. This is a private method defined in the same model. But let's say I didn't know where it was defined. I would type control close square bracket. Vim looks at my tags file, which knows where this method is defined, and jumps my cursor to it. This would work from any other file that I called toCSV. Vim would switch to this file and jump me right to the line where that method is defined. It's very, very useful. Personally, I find these tags files to be most useful when I have vendored Rails in my application. In other words, when Rails is sitting in the vendor/Rails directory. The reason it's so useful is because tags has also indexed the Rails methods. For example, I have my cursor here on a has_many call. Again, I type that same shortcut, Control close square brace, and I'm jumped to the definition of has_many deep within the Rails source. This has actually been really terrific for trying to figure out things, examining edge cases, and just getting a better feel for the Rails source. I really love just dropping in on a random method and seeing how it's written. It's super useful for bringing up your code reading skills and also for trying to understand how something works underneath the hood. Another nice thing about tags is that you're not limited to placing your cursor on something to look it up. If you want, you can simply type tag and then a tag name, such as a method name, name scope. Here, typing this will take us to the name scope definition. Another cool thing about tags is that you can pass in a regular expression. Let's say we wanted to find a method that began with validates presence. We have this .star to match any other characters afterwards. We call this, and Vim returns a list of all the tags that match that regular expression. Notice that there's a number in the left-hand column. If you enter in the number, Vim will take you to the corresponding tag definition. Let's take the last one, number 4, just the plain old validates presence of. And there we are. One of my favorite new tools that I've come across relatively recently is something called ACK. So ACK is a grep replacement targeted at programmers. It has a number of really good defaults and useful functionality right out of the box that are particularly good for the kind of tasks that programmers are doing all the time. So I'm going to demo a little bit of that functionality and show you why I think it's so useful and why it has replaced grep for me, and then I'm going to show you an easy way to use this from inside Vim. Let's take a quick look at ACK. The task that I find myself using grep for most frequently is to search my project tree for certain files that have a matching pattern in them. So let's say I'm in the root of my project and I want to search all my .rb files for an instance of the word controller. In vanilla grep, that would look something like this. I'm going to first find everything that ends in .rb, grep out my .git directory, and then from all those, grep through them for the word controller. Here's how the same thing would look in ACK. This is a lot simpler, and the reason is that ACK has a lot of really great defaults out of the box to support this kind of task, and it also understands a variety of file types. So as for defaults, first of all, ACK searches recursively automatically. I really like this default because I find that probably 95% of the time I was using grep with -r anyway. So not having to type that is nice. You can of course turn this off with another command line switch, but I find that I rarely need to do that. Secondly, ACK understands a wide variety of file types. I've used Ruby here, but if you want to see all the ones that it supports, you can pass --help types as an argument. Here's the complete list. You'll see that when I'm using Ruby, I'm actually getting not just RB files, but Ruby-related files as well. As you might have guessed, if you like, you can add your own file types. Finally, notice that I don't have to tell ACK to ignore my .git directory. That's because, again, ACK's default is to ignore .git and .svn directories, and also other file types that are not likely to be useful as well. For example, if I have a file in my directory that's a Vim backup, so it's a file name with a tilde at the end, ACK will ignore that. Similarly for binary files, which are unlikely to have information that you want in them. One final great thing about ACK is that it allows you to have a .ackrc. Anything you put in the .ackrc will be appended to the command line every time you run the utility. Mine looks like this. Simply one line. I have it ignoring the Rails directory. And I do this because in a project I'm typically not interested in the vendor/Rails directory. I typically just want to see what's happened in my code. And so this is run by default for me every time with this .ackrc. Here's how to use ACK from inside of Vim. I'm here in my vimrc, and this is the relevant line. I'm setting grep prg to ACK. Now when I type :grep from inside Vim, it will call ACK instead. So here's that search that we did before, called from inside Vim. You can see that though I've typed grep, ACK is being used. It's passed along the arguments that we specified, and the results show up right away. These are all the occurrences of the word controller in Ruby type files. So now if I hit enter, Vim will take me to the first result. You can see I'm on 1 of 19. Now if I want to go to the next result, I can type :cn, and if I want to go to the previous result, I can do :cp. This is great, but a little too slow for flipping between a lot of results. So I bound Control-N and Control-P to this, and this lets me jump through all my search results very quickly between any number of files. I use this all the time. It's really handy for looking for all the occurrences of something in your Rails project. I definitely recommend binding some easy key combination to both :cn and :cp. This next tip is fairly simple, but I'm surprised how often I find people that aren't familiar with it. My cursor is over here in the middle of a double-quoted string. Let's say I wanted to change this entire string. With my cursor right where it is, I'd have to say back, and then do something like change t double quote. This is not bad, but we can do better. From where my cursor was before, I can instead say ci double quote. And that's short for change inside double quotation marks. That'll delete everything inside those two delimiters and then put you in insert mode right between them. And now I can type out my new string. This works on a number of different delimiters. So for instance, if I wanted to change this document word instead, I could say change inside single quote instead. Extremely useful. Now let's say that instead of changing what's inside these quotes, I want to remove the string altogether. The fastest command for that is DA double quotes. That stands for delete around double quotes. And that will take away everything inside the quotes and the quotes themselves. This also works with different text motions like words. Let's say I wanted to delete this entire word page, and I wanted to do it where my cursor was in the middle of the word. I could say DAW, delete around word. Something I find myself needing to do pretty frequently is I'll be in the middle of writing up a method when I'll realize I want to go out to the top of the class, particularly in the models, to check out what the associations are, or perhaps a constant that's defined at the top of the class, and then jump back down into my method and continue what I was doing once I've checked that out. So here's a really convenient way to do this. I leave insert mode from my method and type GG to go to the top of the screen. I check out what I need to do, and now I want to jump back down to where I was last inserting text. Fortunately, you can just type GI, and Vim will take you back to where you were last in insert mode and put you in insert mode again. GI, and there I am. One thing I find a lot of people aren't familiar with is Vim's recording of your jumps. Now, if you type jumps in Vim, it will print a list of the last places that your cursor has jumped to, both in this file and others. Now, this is really useful for hopping between places in your files and also between files. So here's an example of a jump. If I'm at the top of the file and I hit G to jump to the bottom, that counts as a jump, and Vim has stored the fact that I left from the top of the file in my jump list. If I want to go back one jump, I can hit Control-O, and Vim will take me back up to where I've gone. Now I can also go the other direction. Since I've jumped back, if I want to jump forward, I hit Control-I. I think of these as out and in. You're going out a jump or you're going in a jump. Now this is really useful because there are a number of things that can make you jump. So if I go back out, Control-O, and I search for private from here, I've now jumped down to my first search result. And so Vim stored the fact that I left from the top of the file on the jump list. So after searching, if I want to go back to where I was, Control-O will take me there again. Now jumps aren't stored just between places in a single file, but also between files. So I showed you in a different section how to jump to something using a tag by typing Control close square brace. For instance, when my cursor is on validates presence of, and I press that combination, I'm taking the definition of it deep in the Rails source. However, if now I want to jump back to the file I was in, I just hit Control-O. Vim takes me back one jump. If I change my mind and want to go back in, it's just Control-I. This next command I want to show you is something I find myself using dozens of times every day. So the one I'm interested in is this command right here. I've bound it to leader E, and what it does is it edits, and then it edits this large expression here. This entire thing expands out to be the path of the current file. It's not super important that you understand how that works exactly, but if you want to, you can type help expand and read the docs on that one. The important thing to know is that this expands out into the current directory of the file that you're editing. You'll notice that I also have that same expansion bound to S and V for splitting and vertical splitting. So let me show you what that looks like in practice. Here I'm in the app models directory editing a model, and let's say I wanted to edit a different model instead. I can type leader E and then enter, and that will open up the current directory that file is in. See, I'm in the app models directory. What I find myself doing probably even more frequently is to vertically split this. So leader V does V new on that file name path, and now I have a vertical split showing the directory that file is found in. I use this really frequently. It's very useful for pulling stuff up side by side. You can copy these commands right into your vimrc. If you want to copy them from mine directly, cut and paste, you can get at my vimrc on github/r00k in the .files repository. Another useful one you might want to poach from my vimrc is this mapping right here. And what this does is it runs git blame on the highlighted selection that you pass it. So what this looks like is, if I want to know who wrote this method right here, I go into visual mode, capital V, and then highlight the entire area I'm interested in. Then a leader B will send this out through git blame and tell me who wrote this stuff. As usual, I have no one but myself to blame. Another plugin that you should definitely have is called TComment, and it's a plugin that allows you to quickly comment out a number of lines of code in a lot of different supported languages. So as you'd expect, Ruby is supported. If you highlight a number of lines and then enter the TComment command, it'll comment out each of them. The great thing is that TComment also understands different file types. If I'm in ERB, I can still comment things out. Same thing for JavaScript and XML and quite a number of different languages. This is a good one to add to your toolkit. And that's it. I really hope this was useful for you. I hope you got a lot out of it that's going to make you a more efficient Rails developer. I'd love to get any feedback you have on this. My contact information is on this slide. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with any comments or criticisms, big or small, especially if you've noticed any errors in the screencast. I'd love to hear about it. I'd also just love to hear what you learned, what you found interesting, and what you didn't. I guess that's all. Take care. Have a great one.